Good morning, everyone. This is Grant with State of the Spark, and I am so glad you're here. It's about 6:45 East Coast time, depending on where you're at checking in. Welcome to today. And today is a powerful day, and I'm super excited about the content today because I reveal to you the biggest leadership mistakes. Well, the biggest leadership mistake I tend to make. It's a catchy one. And if you're vision oriented, you'll totally feel what I mean. If you're a supporter in your temperament, you'll totally understand because I'm sure you've been a recipient of a crazy vision driven leader like me actually saying crazy things and you being lost. And I'm going to share with you the biggest mistake I make. We're going to cover what Jim Carrey says he does and why he's crazy. We're going to cover how art is waging wars and winning wars from prison, no less. We're going to cover that. We got a lot of cool stuff this morning, and I'm really excited about the framework I've put together here. I'm looking at it, a communication framework for you visionaries to share with your supporters. So basically all ventures, all teams usually gravitate where there's like a vision-driven, whether they're good or bad, if it's irrelevant, but a vision-driven, charismatic leader of some kind, and they're usually surrounded by a handful of detail-oriented people that truly in their hearts want to support. And there's always this dynamic tension of the visionary going, why aren't you doing more? And the supporters going, well, we think we're trying to do the best we can, but you don't give us any details. I'm going to unpack that a little bit with a framework today. But before we get into any of that, we're going to cover on this lovely Monday other news that doesn't have anything to do with the crazy that they want you to be thinking about, but broadening your mind. And before any of that, we're going to get into a cup of gratitude. So let's start with that. If you're okay with that, I'm okay with that. Let's kick this week off, this powerful, crazy, energetic, inspiring week. Let's kick this week off together with a cup of morning gratitude. Ba-da-da. Here we go. So what I'm grateful for today is this show. And I was reflecting on this morning, especially as it comes to this Jim Carrey quote. And I don't want to give the quote away because it's part a little bit of our dialogue down the page today. As we talk about other stuff, we're going to talk about what Jim Carrey said. But the thing I love about State of the Spark, you guys know our mission. And it's not two-dimensional. It's not something that slaps on the wall and we all ignore it. I live and breathe to ignite lives of explosive significance. And what does that mean? That means that I get crazy on the show. I cover crazy things like other news. I talk about the future. I talk about today. I come up with mental models. We have fun with Thinking Friday. Why am I jumping all over the place? Because I want to send a message to you. I want to send a message to you that the only thing that will live long after you and I pass, and I say that with joy, long after you and I are gone and the next generation is at the helm of our species and our planet and everything that's going on, the only thing that will remain from us is what was in our hearts, is who we are, is what we're made up and the message we send to the world. And I want you to feel free from being stifled. I want you to feel free from being concerned about what other people think, about what the little devil on your shoulder thinks. I'm grateful today. My cup of gratitude today is I am grateful to be sharing this moment with you. And hopefully I say something that triggers something. You know, I've heard some people critique, Grant, you're giving us so much content in terms of the frameworks, like which of these do I act on? What's right for my business? Listen, we can take this conversation to the coaching if necessary. Like if we need to jump over to doing a coaching one-on-one and get tactical for you, let's do that. But I do jump when I have a platform like this. I jump all over, not just to stimulate your mind, but to download all the different possibilities. Because if you're in a positive state, if you're in a possibility state, you will think of more solutions for yourself. You'll think of more solutions for your friends. That's my hope for you this week. You know, we studied permaculture for a while, and one of the number one things that is bad for a permaculture environment is stagnant things. You want things flowing. You want things moving. I just read a little bit about Bruce Lee. We're talking about Bruce Lee this morning. One of the things I read about Bruce Lee was the reason he got so far ahead in the early days is that he had studied dance. And so a lot of his martial arts style was about movement. And if you've seen these movements or these movies with Bruce Lee, he always was dancing and moving back and forth like a boxer. And a lot of the Chinese method of Kung Fu was very firm foundation and stuck. We know from permaculture, we know from martial arts, and we know from so many other ways, if your paradigm is stuck and rigid, whether you gave yourself that paradigm or whether you inherited that paradigm from the world or whether you inherited that paradigm from your parents. What's an example of this? Republicanism is the only way. Democratism is the only way. The president's going to make a change. The president's bad. The president's good. If you hold these things too fixed, you're going to find yourself stuck and life would have passed you by. I am grateful in my morning cup of gratitude this morning for a moment to spend time with you and talk about other possibilities and other potentialities so that you and I can come up with better solutions, stronger solutions, more flexible solutions to living a more fulfilled life. That's what we mean when we say igniting lives of explosive significance. We've got a lot of frameworks. We've got a lot of systems. If you need specific help, visit us in some of our other platforms like the Goals and Gratitude platform or these other places that we can actually diagnose specifically what you need. But if it ever seems like I'm jumping, my morning cup of gratitude is grateful for this moment to broaden what is possible for you living your own life of explosive significance. So that's what I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for Mondays, and I'm grateful that you and I can share this moment together of broadening ourselves. So with that, let's go into other news. Here we go. In other news, art wins wars. Well, I mean, that's true in so many different levels. We could say that that's esoterically true. We could say the quote for V from Vendetta, ideas can't be killed. I'm an idea and ideas can't be killed. And we could say that about art, but in a very specific sense. I'm going to butcher this gal's name, but her name, I believe, is Zehra Dogan, a Kurdish woman who is an artist and a journalist, began to expose Kurdish feminism, as well as the role of the female in the Kurdish culture. And this cost her, through a series of things, which I'll share briefly, to be in jail for 3 years. 3 years in a Kurdish prison. And from prison, she continued to do art. And I'll tell you where she got her palette, which is wild. She continued to do art, and then as they would do laundry, they would often basically put them to work, and laundry would come in, and they would clean it, and then the laundry would go out. She would sneak her artwork out with the laundry, and that artwork would still end up in the public space and influence thinking. This gal is a true revolutionary. Let me share her link real quick. Boom, boom. Waging wars with art. So basically, after 2015, there was a peace talk between the Kurd military and a local group. And after those peace talks, they still went into a town and bombed a town in a military mission. They still bombed this town. And so she went out and painted this town and shared the artwork in her own creative way. And of course, the Kurds were like, what is this? And then on top of that, her message of feminism rising in the Kurdish culture was unwelcome. Well, lo and behold, she gets put into prison. And you got to hear this. In prison, she discovered crushed herbs made green, kale, the purple kale, made the purple color, pomegranate, or this is a little early in the morning for this, but menstrual blood made the red, ballpoint pen ink made the blue, and then for a gray tone, she used cigarette ash, coffee grounds, pepper, and turmeric was the rest of her prison palette. She was released a few years later as the government was shifting, and I think things are getting better in general, but obviously not there yet for Kurdish women. But this woman now, Zehra Dogan, continues to wage her war throughout the rest of Europe by sharing what's going on with her artwork. This is an impressive attempt by an artist, or not attempt, success by an artist, finding any means necessary and believing in the power of art. I can get up here and ramble here. It's a good medium for me. I can continue to speak on stages as I do, or do coaching as we do, to set people free. And when you set people free, they do big things. When Zara Dogan, again, forgive me for butchering her name, when Zara Dogan puts her artwork out there, she trusts that people, it will resonate with some and ignite a movement of its own. And that's what I hope for in this small corner of the world, whether it's me doing my artwork and helping to encourage people to find their theory of everything, which is partly what the ENSO is. It's the theory of everything amongst the chaos. And I could actually break down some of my art at some point. My hope is that as I get better as an artist, as I get better as a speaker, as I get better as a trainer, that I ignite you to make the radical movement you need to make. This is my gift. I don't know what yours is. Just like crazy visionaries are a gift, as well as a curse, double-edged sword, hello, to the supporters of the world who want to be told what to do and where they can put their support gifts. I have watched Marissa, as a support temperament, do extraordinary things. And when I give her a clear sense of vision and a clear sense of content, she really does make extraordinary things. And now she's self-propelling. She gives herself the assignments. I hope to ignite you that way, just as Zara Dogan has done with her artwork. Check that artwork out. I'd love your feedback. And if you have an art form, this is out to you, Dan Sampson. I know you have an art form. This is out to you, Robert Berganza. I know you have an art form. This is to all of you who have an art form. I want to see. This is to you, Dory Joseph, who I know that you're an architect and an artist. I'd like to see your artwork in the comments. And I'm telling you, I'm calling it right now. If you're watching, if you're one of the 6 people watching this live, the best artwork voted by the people in the comments, voted by the posts in the comments, will get a $50 gift certificate from me. I'm going to write this down. Give me a second. I just came up with this $50 gift card to the best art posted in these comments. I don't necessarily believe art will save us per se, but it'll save some. I don't believe this show will save the world, but I certainly believe this show will ignite some. Let that be the lesson from Zara Dogan, the artist amongst the Kurds, the artist amongst the Kurds, traveling throughout Europe, sharing her art. And that is the first piece of other news. Here we go. So can artificial intelligence please pick up our garbage? Can the artificial intelligence please pick up our garbage? I saw this title today, and I thought, oh my God, it's about time that we found some useful thing for AI. That was the title I saw. And my hope is this. My hope is that we move from the esoteric to the pragmatically useful. You know, a good friend of ours, a family friend, he's family to us. Eli and Marissa and I have breakfast most weekends, whether it's a Saturday or a Sunday. We just love having breakfast with Eli. He's become family. He has grown in his own journey. We met him when he was in his young 20s, and now he's in school for being a philosophy teacher and a psychologist and doing his own sessions. But he wants to help people get through their nihilism. We meet with him and we often talk philosophy, and then we often have to check ourselves and say, this is fancy philosophy, but does it take into account human nature and action? When we talk about artificial intelligence, we're often talking about pie in the sky stuff. And that pie in the sky stuff is super fun, but let's land this plane. When I saw this heading, I thought AI is going to remove garbage. No, what they've come up with is this. There's these plastic traps on storm drains throughout the city or the Commonwealth, and I believe this is a Commonwealth in Australia. It's basically a plastic trap, and plastic is going through the water drains, and it gets thrown everywhere, as plastic does, as the COVID masks do. They get disposed of, haphazardly end up in the street and end up in the gutters. And so they have these plastic drain traps, and AI is now in the cameras where AI is counting and categorizing plastic. Now, this sounds like a complete waste of time. It's not. If it gathers enough data, it can have predictive models where it's actually showing almost real time how garbage is being, or how plastic is being used and disposed of. And it can then report back to governance and legislators immediately to fine the companies that need to be fined for their waste, to regulate the use of those plastics, or to get to the source more quickly. Quite often, we're collecting this elsewhere, much further down the line with human labor that's having to count and sort and take into account for, okay, well, what is this and where did it come from? What is this plastic and where was it or what's its origins? Now AI can database it and categorize it much more quickly and give feedback loops. So I do believe this is starting to bridge pie in the sky AI with practical use AI. And I have a link here for those who are interested in kind of the deployment of this type of artificial intelligence. There you go. Hopefully making an AI trash picker soon enough. And then our last piece of other news. You might even be watching the show right now at facebook.com/State of the Spark. And props to you for doing so, because the show is going to move at a date to be determined in the future. Today's live is playing for the first time over at State of the Spark. Eventually, all our conversation, all of our comments, all of our dialogue will be happening over there. So in our last piece of other news, please go visit us at facebook.com/State of the Spark, because the show's moving over there. All right, here we go. So I am here to confess my sins. Here, allow me to confess my sins. Quite often in the show, I actually like to tell you the mistakes I've made, hopefully so that you don't make them or that you rapidly identify if you're making a similar mistake. So our goal here at State of the Spark, as I said and started the show with, is to unlock you, to unlock your greatness, to help you do massively important things for yourself so that you go through life fulfilled, so that you go through life energized and not like, How many people are just like black hole soul suckers? They don't know their place in the world and they want autonomy, but they want you to tell them what to do. Come on. I want to share a quick story, very small one. Jim Kwik, author of Limitless, which I'm really enjoying right now. I'd love to have Jim Kwik on the show. Post if you'd like me to have Jim Kwik on the show. I would really like to reach out and have that guy on the show. He interviewed Jim Carrey, and he was actually keynoting at a Deepak Chopra meeting. And when he finished, he sat down to watch the rest of the meeting, and a looming figure creeps up from behind him and stands over him, and it's Jim Carrey. And they go into the hallway and have a conversation and decide they're going to work together because Jim Carrey was working on Dumb and Dumber 2. And he says to Jim Kwik, I think I need to become smarter in order to become dumb and dumberer. And they laughed about that. So they met together to go over his script, to go over memory, to actually talk about a lot of his skills to work with Jim Carrey. And they stopped, as Jim Kwik tells the story, to make a bowl of guacamole, one of his favorite brain foods. And they stopped to talk, and he asks Jim Carrey, why do you act the way you do on the screen? And Jim Carrey kind of laughed and thought about it and said to him, I'd like to free people from concern. Concern about what other people think is what Jim Carrey was talking about. Concern about what their own inner critic thinks. This show, State of the Spark, our business, State of the Spark, is all about igniting lives of explosive significance. We want you to let go of the concerns you have that are holding you back from being your highest self. Now, whether or not religion is holding you back, or whether or not lack of discipline is holding you back, whatever it is that's holding you back from being your highest self, State of the Spark wants to help you with a freedom framework, wants to help you with a vision, wants to help you with inspiration, wants to help you to educate, empower, and encourage you to be your highest self. That's what State of the Spark does. Spark your vision, ignite success, explode significance, radiate purpose. That's what we're here for. But when you do this with a team, here's the problem. When it comes to management, you can't manage people the way you coach them. You see, when you coach someone, they give you money to tell you the truth because so many people around them won't tell them the truth. And you give them a framework and you help them get revelation and realizations. But management needs more guidance than that. And I don't know why, and it shouldn't be, but it is true. I'm not even going to get into why employees don't respond to you the way coaching clients do. Partly it's the expectations. Partly it's because you're paying them and they always have an unconscious fear of being let go, no matter how abundant-minded you are. So what I have found is that even though we're all about igniting lives of explosive significance and we try our hardest to apply this in an employment world, you give people so much freedom, but suddenly they make a decision that adversely affects the clients. And you'd like to think, well, I wouldn't have done it that way. So you jump in. It creates a different dynamic. So you can't manage people the way you coach them. This is one of the mistakes I am confessing. I tried for a long time to manage people the way I coach them. And that doesn't always work. So the dilemma, and this is a like a generations long dilemma. How do you empower people and encourage people and educate people to raise up as their own leaders, but then watch them do something that adversely affects your bottom line and everyone else's bottom line and not panic and not jump in? So how do you set them free while guiding them to do great things while not prescriptively browbeating them on how to accomplish the outcome? Because that's what leads to growth, is people discovering their own. This is a huge dilemma that I have failed time and again. So what's worse, though, is as you raise up independently minded people, they raise up and they know that they need more input. So even though you're giving them freedom like you would a coaching client, you're giving them enough freedom to hang themselves, as the term goes. They still turn to you because they're employees and they're going, you didn't train me enough. Well, you're supposed to kind of do some discovery here. You didn't coach me enough. Well, you're supposed to grow a little bit. They seem to know exactly how much you have either trained too much or not trained enough. And you seem to know exactly the way they should go, but you don't want to tell them because you want them to discover it for themselves. This is a lifelong dilemma, and it led me to create a framework. And I'm going to share the framework with you very quickly, but this is not the so this is not the solution to the problem. So the problem is the sin that I have made. I'll get into that in a second. Let me give you the framework first. The framework is this. There's a spectrum, as so many frameworks have a spectrum or a grid or a Venn diagram. This framework is the people first approach versus the process first approach of building a business. So the people first approach is this. If you give people enough freedom, they will perform. You focus on the vision, they will want to be a part of that vision. So then they will take up the right problems. They will self-educate the right way, and they will eventually, or sooner than later, come up with the right solutions. And the solutions will be so empowered that it'll make up for all the delay that occurred when you gave them freedom. This is the ultimate extreme on the spectrum of people first. The philosophy is if you give them freedom, they will perform. On the other side, you got the process first approach. And the idea is people matter, but if you build the process and tell them what to do and define the roles, people will then refine themselves against that system and move up, move laterally, or move out of the company entirely. And you would have set them free to the marketplace. It's not that people don't matter. People matter a lot. It's that when I'm talking about the category of the business, I'm talking about system and labor. And I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about shaping the system. So on the spectrum, you got people first versus process first. The process matters first. It's not that people matter none. It's that people need to fit into the role and need to move up or move on, right? They need to elevate themselves or move on. So people first approach. If you give them enough freedom, people will perform. Keith Ferrazzi wrote Leading Without Authority. Vishen Lakhiani, Code of the Extraordinary Mind. Daniel Coyle, and I've read all these books. We've got them on the bookshelf. Talent Code, Culture Code. Michael Michalowicz believes he has answers to that with Clockwork. Richard Branson is big on Screw It, Let's Do It. The book 10% Happier. If you focus on vision, and it doesn't matter how long and the time scale is on the vision. If you focus on vision, people will just show up and go, I love your vision. And if they don't show up, it's because you don't have a big enough, bright enough, exciting enough vision that will attract them. And then they will just know their unique genius, or you'll help them find their unique genius, and they'll self-describe their own role. And then they'll determine the training they need for the role, and it'll be accurate. And then they'll suddenly start producing and fill in your gaps. That's the people first approach. The process first approach is that the system needs roles to be filled. And it's similar to vision, but it's detail, right? Here's my system. Here's my system on paper. Here's the steps. Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. E-Myth is kind of an abundant version of this. True Believer written by Eric Hoffer, True Believer by Eric Hoffer. That book follows, and books like this follow this methodology of systems first. E-Myth Enterprise. I could go over to the calendar and find, even though Peter Drucker was all about management, he did come from the era where that you have to build a business and the systems, and then management is the process of helping people find themselves within the system. So it assumed that the process comes first. It assumes that the business comes first. And though we need to be good managers and abundant-minded managers, and there needs to be some mechanism for people feeling abundant-minded, it was still the process first approach. People first focuses on vision, and it sets people free to become who they are. Sounds so good on the eardrums, especially today. Process first approach sounds completely oppressive, but the entrepreneurs in my mind know that, oh God, if only I could just do that. They do. So what's in the middle? The middle is what I call the middle ground. This is where I believe Ray Dalio's principles fall, his book Principles. This is where I believe Stephen Covey's book, The Eighth Habit, falls. And the absolute middle is what I call personal development first, starting with you. It's right in the middle of people versus processes. It acknowledges that both are absolutely critical. And it assumes two things. You got to develop yourself, and the outflow of vision comes. And then the degree of detail that's natural for you at that state of personal development comes. And then that will attract or repel who it should at that moment. You are giving them freedom to join you and work at the level of detail you're able to provide. But it's not necessarily that it's process driven, and it's not necessarily that it's principle driven. It's what I would call personal development driven. This has been my framework for a long time. I need to refine it. It's been something I've worked with for a long time. So here's where I have failed. This is the absolute confession. This is me delivering on the promise that I opened with. I have failed that I speak too much into the people-oriented side. I speak into too much vision, and I don't earmark that vision. That's the sin. Whoa. Wait, what does that mean? I don't earmark the vision. So Napoleon Hill says in Think and Grow Rich, the 11 major attributes of a leader. I recommend, if you haven't read it, pick it up. Here's my old busted original copy. You can see it's falling apart. It's torn at the seams. This was my original copy of Think and Grow Rich, and I've had like 4 of them since. The 11 major attributes of a leader: unwavering courage, self-control, a keen sense of justice, definiteness of decisions, definiteness of plans, habit of doing more than paid for, a pleasing personality, sympathy and understanding, mastery of detail, willingness to assume full responsibility, and cooperation. We can talk about this some other time. I get a 6 out of 10. And of these major attributes of a leader, I fail in mastery of detail, definiteness of plans, and a few others that I won't go into, but that's what I want to focus on. This is the biggest management mistake I constantly make. I err on the side of my spectrum of being more people-oriented. I want them to like me. I want them to be sold on the vision first. I want that to pepper everything they do. But then when they come to me and say, Grant, that's great, but what's the plan? I'll say things like, hey, we're going to be a training company. State of the Spark at Large is going to be a training company. It's going to have training tools. And so my supporter temperament, and if you're watching and you're a supporter temperament, you're allowed to post in the comments, amen, brother. They follow through and clock into work after I paint this vision. They clock into work and they go, okay, we've got to start working on becoming a training company. And they'll work 8 hours that day on trying to figure out this problem. How do we become a training company? And they'll work through Wednesday like, okay, I'm still managing my website company clients. I'm still managing my bookkeeping company clients. Marissa's like, I'm still building these quests, but how do I solve for training? And then they come to me and tug on my shirt and go, hey, what's the plan here? And I'll go, well, I just meant in the future. And they're like, I just worked 24 hours of my 40-hour week on something that will eventually become. Whose fault is that? Well, if we go with number 10, willingness to assume full responsibility, it's my fault. But if they were leaders too, they would also think, well, that's my fault for not clarifying. It's everybody's fault, right? So when the sin I make is that when I speak vision, I don't earmark that vision. If you're a supporter and a visionary has come to you, a visionary leader that you served under has come to you and said, hey, we're going to take this crazy direction. And you're like, I want to help, but you've said that before. So I'm either not going to act at all, or I'm going to act and do the best I can, but it's a half-ass effort because I don't really know if you're going to change your mind tomorrow. It's almost like visionaries need an intermediary. It's almost like Walt Disney needed his brother Roy Disney to understand Walt and go, yes, we're going there, but then also pivot and go, okay, this is how we're going to do it. It's almost like every ID temperament in the DISC system needs a CD temperament, not an S. I used to say every I temperament needs about 5 S temperaments around them to fulfill the vision. One of those S's needs to be a CD, CSD, CDS temperament, where they want to support that vision, but they can push back and they can butt heads. I don't know if you know this, but like Walt Disney and Roy Disney got into fist fights over different directions of the company, but it actually came out in the wash to build the company we know as Disney today. Now, at one point, just Walt needed to die. But Walt spent time with people like Buckminster Fuller and Thomas Edison, and they actually dreamed about the future. And they'd say, this is what the future was like. Epcot Center, this is what the future's like. And we're like, yay, let's make a ride. And Walt Disney was absolutely disappointed because he was trying to build Epcot, the experimental prototype city of tomorrow. He actually was trying to build a city for people to live in, not a ride. He wanted people to come through this home that people actually lived in, not a ride that people paid to ride. That was the result of an ID temperament and a CD temperament butting heads and creating a middle ground. The visionary mistake I always make, the management mistake I always make, is I don't earmark what time scale. I don't tag the time scale I'm speaking about. We'll be in a huddle, which you should do, and I'll go, this is what we're doing, and this is where we're going. But they look at me like, where are you at? I've since learned this, and then I'll give you a communications framework, and then we can get out of here. And I'll even post it in the comments. I can just copy and paste it. What I've learned is that when I'm speaking vision, as I wrap up, I need to pause and earmark the time scale I'm speaking of. If I go, we're going to become a training company, and that's what we're going to help people, and that's how we're going to ignite our goal is to ignite 1 million lives of explosive significance. That's our BHAG, our big, hairy, audacious, noble goal, or our BHANG. We're going to reach that many people, and we're going to see that many people launch a vision, and we want that many people to be people who can affect another 100. So now we've reached 100 million people because we launched 1 million people's dreams, businesses, nonprofits, small business, whatever. Their cause. We've launched them to become CEOs of the company, moving up as an entrepreneur. That's our big goal. Grant, what's the timeline? Oh, well, I just mean over the next 5 to 10 to 15 years. So what are we working on now? Well, Spark Sites is going to be this week. So hear me on this. If you are a visionary, if you're a visionary or if you're a supporter, if you're a visionary, you need to begin earmarking the time scale. Now, why visionaries don't earmark the time scale is they hope that the vision is stirring enough, that it creates enough blast in the jet engine that is this team, and that the team starts putting in the hours, putting in the extra time, coming up with a genius idea where they don't have to put in extra time, but they mega leap forward with a new breakthrough. The goal is, if I tell you 5 to 10 years, you won't try today. That's what breaks the heart of the visionary. Why wouldn't you try today? Well, we've got practical things to do. I know, but give it the extra effort. I'm not asking for 110. I'm literally asking for 150 and 200% effort. Well, you said I didn't have to work past 40 hours. You don't have to. I just want you to. Your pay's not going to be affected. I'm not going to fire you, but of course we've got a vision. That's the problem of the visionary. That's why they don't tell you the time scale. But in all honesty, if this was accomplished by the time I croaked, I'd be okay. But why wait that long? If you are an S temperament or supporter temperament or any other temperament other than visionary, if you're a supporter, here's what you need to do. If a visionary is talking, you need to simply ask, hey, over what time period are you picturing? And let them answer. They might not, but it gives you a good communication line because they're not even thinking in terms of time. Of course, a visionary wants to see this today. But you could say, hey, over what time period? And know that time period should get earmarked because that is how a visionary forms their plans. A visionary forms their plans by jumping through time in their brain and saying, and they're filling in the gaps. They just don't work linear. A visionary often has clarity at nearly any scale, but they just don't think linear. They think in pot shots. So every other linear thinker, which is what a defining feature of a supporter, they think in a linear way quite often. And I'm not even saying limited. They just think in a linear way, which means, okay, so if that happens, then what happens first and what happens that? That dialogue is what needs to happen. And honestly, a visionary is hoping you take these pot shots and go, okay, I'm feeling this, and collaborate to create a linear plan. A visionary wants a plan. They just don't want to be limited by that plan because that limits their mojo. Supporters don't want to be limited by scatter disorganization because that limits their mojo. Somewhere in the middle, you have to come up with a linear line. The sin I have made is I haven't earmarked the time scale at which I've been thinking of. So here is a quick framework, and we can let you go on with your week. I'm going to actually post this. A simple calm tool. Here, can I post it here? Boom, there it is. A simple calm tool. Communicate framework. And for those watching, copy and paste this thing. If you're having an encounter, whether you're a visionary or supporter, and you guys are coming together, add this tool. Earmark. Visionaries, if you're watching, visionaries should earmark at what scale? And they should come from an abundant-minded place, not an oppressive place. Visionaries should be free to be what they are, and that is crazy and visionary. So they should be free to step in and say, man, we're going to take over the planet. We're going to do, with Marissa's Spark Explorer, we're going to start the first hiking trail on Mars. What the hell are you talking about? Oh, well, yeah, we're going to do it in the next 20 years, but bear with me. Like we're going to be prepping for bear. Well, in 10 years, that means we got to be focused on something with space, and we got to add astro whatever to our thing and then reverse engineer that. But I don't have to come up with that plan. I just need the earmark. Oh, yeah, you guys don't have to work on that this week. Dream about it. Let it pepper your dreams. Don't flush it. It shouldn't get flushed just because a visionary said it was a 20-year goal. But you don't have to solve that this week. We need to reverse engineer what we need to work on this week. So a visionary, here's your tool. Just say, I'm speaking on X timeline. And here's the timeline. Does this need to be done next? Does it need to be done today or this week? And don't just be ridiculous if you're the visionary and go, all right, yeah, we're going to Mars this week. You know, Parkinson's law, work expands to fill the time allotted. Okay. It's not a SMART goal. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, or time-bound. It's time-bound, but it's not realistic or achievable. If you're speaking about now, that's today or this week. If you're speaking about next, that's sometime this month through the end of the month. If you're speaking about soon, it's sometime over the next quarter. If you're speaking about later, it's sometime over this year or the next. And if it's someday, maybe, it's something 2-3 years or more. You as the visionary, you as a small business owner, as you're trying to rally people around you, free help, side help, interns, paid help, it doesn't matter what scale they're coming in at, they need more clarity. Not everyone is a visionary. If there's an average of visionaries, by definition, not everyone is actually a visionary. I have to come up with this quote. I just read a quote, and it would take some people's breath away to hear that this person actually said not everyone was meant to be a visionary or vision-driven. And not every visionary is a good visionary, right? We're not just assuming that either. What we're assuming is that we have to bridge the gap between the visionary and the supporters in their lives. Both have a unique genius. Supporters have an extraordinary, unique genius that we need more of. Visionaries have an extraordinary, unique genius that needs to pair. And together, if you use this language, that doesn't have to be done now, guys. Hey, Grant, you were on a tirade about state of the Spark. Spark Sites needs to be at a certain dollar figure. Well, over what time period? Over the next 6 months. Like, we have to hit this dollar figure. Not this week and not even this quarter. But we have to hit this dollar figure. That's something we should really get serious about. And though the brain is peppered with the fact that we'll eventually become a training company as opposed to a services company, that's not immediate. Though we're talking about SaaS as a software as a service for Spark, that's not immediate. We don't have to work on that today. We got to work on something else. Visionaries need to become better leaders. Just because you're a visionary doesn't make you a good leader or a good manager. So this framework, a simple calm tool, communications tool, is the framework that you guys should use between a visionary and supporter to say, when roughly should this be done? Don't be afraid to push back and say, I think that timeline is great. I think that timeline is too long. It shouldn't take us 20 years to build the first hiking trail on the Mars or the moon. It shouldn't take that long. If you're a supporter, encourage your visionaries by getting a little more aggressive in your timelines. Visionaries help your supporters by getting a little less aggressive in your timelines. But don't give up the vision, because that's both of our roles. To create this dynamic tension where the visionaries pull in one way and the supporters are pulling another, and somewhere in the middle, we prop up a gorgeous sculpture, a gorgeous piece of artwork for where we're going together. So that's my confession. My confession is when I often talk about vision, I don't earmark and help out everyone around me by earmarking and tagging what timeline I'm expecting something done. I hear you, S temperament, C temperament, supporter temperaments. I hear you. You do want to help me achieve what I want to achieve. I know you do. We all want that outcome, but you need a little more support yourself and what you should work on and what you should prioritize. And hopefully this tool helps you do that. Listen, I got to run and have coffee with my beautiful wife. I hope this has been at least interesting, at least educational, at least encouraging, at least empowering, something in that vein. And if nothing more, I hope it just expanded your mind a little bit so that you just got to thinking about what's possible for you. So I'm going to go and start my lovely day igniting lives of explosive significance. Don't you lose sight of the mission to ignite lives of explosive significance, starting with your own. Go be great today. Go let us know how we can support you by joining the Goals and Gratitude or Small Business Group on Facebook. And remember, start following us here on Facebook, because we're going to actually start putting the show there only and having the dialogue there. Have a great day. Keep kicking butt, and let us know how we can support your big, hairy, audacious goal too. Have a great one.